Mellon. I'm the chair of the Committee on Arts, Culture, and Special Events. I want to remind you that this is a public hearing and is being recorded on broadcast live on Xfinity 8, RCN 82, and Fios 964 and streamed on www.boston.gov/city-council/TV and will be rebroadcast at a later date. Please silence your cell phones and all other devices. We will also be taking public testimony and would appreciate it if you sign in to testify to the left over here close to the entrance, and we will register your attendance. Anyone that would like to testify virtually on this matter, please email Juan, that's JUAN, .Lopez, LOPEZ, @boston.gov with your full name for the Zoom link. At the start of your testimony, please state your name, address, and affiliation. So this docket and this hearing today is on docket number 1197. The matter is sponsored by the mayor and was referred to the Committee on Arts, Culture, and Special Events on July 19th, 2023. The docket, I'm just going to summarize it for the record. So docket 1197 is a message in order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend the amount of $3 million in the form of a grant for the Transforming Boston grant, awarded by the Andrew E. Mellon Foundation to be administered by the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture. The grant will fund the support of community and curatorial partnerships, new temporary commemorative installations, and related public art programs. I'm joined by my colleagues today, as always, Council President Ed Flynn. Thank you so much for being here. I think we're going to maybe skip opening statements and go right into the presentation and testimony. We have here Kara Elliott Ortega, Chief Arts, Tourism, and Special Events. And then I'm so sorry.
Karen Goodfellow.
Thank you for being here. Karen, what is your title?
I'm the Director of Public Art in the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture.
Beautiful. Before we go into your presentation, I just want to put a note of absence on the record from my council colleague, Brian Worrell. He says, "Dear Councilor Coletta and councilor colleagues, I will unfortunately be unable to attend today's hearing. My staff will be in attendance and I will review the video when it becomes available. I want to commend the lead sponsor for their efforts in securing the Transforming Boston grant from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. This grant presents an exciting opportunity to support community and curatorial partnerships, new temporary commemorative installations, and related public art programs in our city. Initiatives like these enrich our cultural landscape and strengthen our communities. While I am supportive of this ordinance, and maybe you can get to this after your presentation, while I'm supportive of this ordinance, although I believe he means docket, I would like to pose a few questions for consideration. How will the distribution of funds to community and curatorial partnerships be determined, and what criteria will be used to select these partners? Are there plans in place to ensure that the temporary commemorative installations are inclusive and reflective of our diverse communities? And third and lastly, how will the impact and success of these public art programs be measured, and what metrics will be used for evaluation? I believe that this grant has the potential to make a significant positive impact on our city, and I look forward to the discussion during the hearing. Thank you, Brian Worrell, Councilor for District 4. So please feel free to start your presentation.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Chair and Council, for hearing us today. We're really excited to talk about this grant and the work that we hope to do with many, many partners over the course of the next 2 years. As you both know, we've been doing a lot of work through the public art program to really think about the questions of who's represented around the city, whose histories are represented, what stories are being told, what's been left out over the years, not just in terms of what's represented, but also which artists and which communities are engaged as part of the process of creating those pieces of public art or those memorials or commemorative moments. So this is a really exciting investment for the city. We're one of a handful of cities around the country that's receiving this level of foundation support to really be able to put the resources that this question really deserves, right? We try to do this through, right now, through the commissioning programs that we do have, and Karen, as Director of Public Art, will talk more about the specifics of this grant proposal. But what this funding will let us do is really be in conversation with communities in a much deeper way, where we're using short-term public artworks, different kinds of conversations, community conversations, conversations with artists, with historic experts in our field who can actually talk about the history of Boston with just a level of detail and depth that we haven't been able to do before. So we're really excited about this. Like I said, I'll pass it over to Karen to talk more about the actual grant proposal. But I would just say that to keep in mind that there are a lot of partners around the table. So we just received this funding. We're going to be kicking this off shortly. We have a kind of specific amount of time to work with. So there will be a lot of opportunities to kind of shape what comes out of this and to really think about what we collectively want the impact of this investment to be. And we'll also be working really closely with these partners to, I think, answer questions like what will evaluation look like? Some of that we have some ideas about, but we're going to be kind of getting into the weeds as this grant gets up and running. So I think with that, I'll pass it over to Karen.
Thank you. As you know, this grant is primarily focused on temporary art and public conversations. Across the nation, there have been many discussions about how we tell our story through monuments in the last few years. Those conversations were largely focused on the problem of what to do with some of our monuments that perpetuated inaccurate histories. In some cases, people's positions for or against a sculpture prevented them from hearing each other and caring for each other. Here in Boston, we had incredible conversations at home with our friends and with strangers, and we really listened to each other in our public meetings, even when we did not agree. We also planned for big new artworks and filled in some of the gaps in our storytelling, like with The Embrace and Journey of My Soul, the legacy of Frederick Douglass, which is scheduled to be installed this spring. People in Boston have been talking about monumental art with renewed energy. What do we think? What do we like? What stories have yet to be told? With that momentum, the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture, we want to take a creative approach to our discourse on monuments, centering art, joy, and dialogue to promote a multitude of points of view, reject the concept that history is static, and go beyond the binary options of being for or against a particular monument. We want to imagine new ways of telling our story, and we want to do that through this grant from the Mellon Foundation. We will meet the Monument Project's goals to facilitate broader expressions of the powerful multiplicity and complexity of American stories, foster multivocal participation in the shaping of our national commemorative landscape, and deepen public engagement with the building of more accurate collective histories and shared understanding. We will commission temporary artwork and hold free public talks on the subject of the artworks. Through these artworks and conversations, we hope to expand our cultural approach to memory, monuments, and storytelling. We envision a 2-year project with planning happening in the fall and winter months and activities in the spring and summer. We would expect this project to have a similar cycle the second year, but we will be doing learning as we run the first year. And people can participate in this programming in 4 ways. So first is to visit temporary public art installations throughout the city. And artists can also propose projects through the city's transformative public art call. So we expect people to participate both as artists, putting projects forward, and then people coming to visit them. We will also engage the public with accessible text, audio, video, artwork interpretation, and signage, both online and in person. We will have opportunities for public to attend public conversations held at the Embrace. And people can lastly participate in engagement activities, including dinners and reading groups. And all of those will be free. As Chief Elliot Ortega discussed, we'll have a lot of collaborators on this, and many of the sort of exact procedures will be determined in collaboration with them. But we also do plan to have an advisory group that will oversee all of the work of the program. We expect to get started this fall. As I mentioned, we're going to start right now sort of figuring out the logistics. Should we be able to move forward after this hearing, and then we'll put out a public call, and that will kick us off, but expect activities for people to really be able to see what's going on starting in the spring.
Is that the extent of your testimony?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn it over to my colleague, Council President Ed Flynn, for any questions that he might have.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for chairing this important discussion. Thank you to the panelists for the important work you are doing on ensuring arts and culture are enjoyed by everybody throughout the city. One of the issues I focused on as it relates to arts and culture and music is ensuring my constituents, many of them that have never been exposed to this, including immigrant community, ensuring that they are part of the discussion. And I know, Chief, we worked on many projects together in the Chinatown community as well, and those projects went over very well with the residents. I guess my question is, how are you going to engage immigrant community throughout the city? How are you going to include language access? What are you going to specifically look for as it relates to feedback from historical groups maybe that really haven't been part of the process for many years, but to get them included? And I think you are making progress in that, so I want to acknowledge, Chief, that your staff has been excellent in welcoming people across the city to engage in this important discussion as well. Thank you.
Sure. So as I mentioned, Councillor, we are going to have sort of different facets of the program. So there'll be different ways for people to access the conversation. I think in the last few years, I think we've all attended or known about different panels that are all happening in English, are all happening online, and don't feel sort of accessible or fun. So what we're really hoping to do is to engage people by making people want to attend, by having programming and information available in different languages, and working with existing communities and community groups to be able to access, I think, the folks that you're talking about, whether from immigrant groups or just folks who don't consider themselves art people. Because I think we all have a lot to say about the story we tell as a city. And so we're really looking forward to engaging with people in ways that they're interested in talking about the story of Boston.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer, and appreciate the work that you're doing. And just want to be, if I can be helpful as it relates to any discussion in the Chinatown community, using my staff in terms of language and communication access with the Cantonese-speaking community, with the Mandarin-speaking community, please know I'd like to be involved in that. And I think the arts and culture, music, and those are really subjects that I wasn't really exposed to when I was a younger person in school. But I'm glad my children have the opportunity to engage in arts and music and culture, but even more importantly, that my constituents are as well. So just want to say thank you to your team for ensuring everybody is part of this conversation, because it's very important. And Madam Chair, thank you for the important work that you are doing as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President Flynn. I just have a few questions, just getting down into the details and specifics, and if we don't have them yet, of course.
Sure.
I understand that it's going to get ironed out as we move forward in this process. But you had mentioned that we are one of a handful of cities that got this grant at the $3 million level. That's huge. So congratulations, first and foremost, for getting that. What were the other cities? Do we know that were able to get this level of funding?
Yeah, they are.
We do know.
We do. Asheville, North Carolina, Chicago, Columbus, Ohio, Denver, Colorado, Los Angeles, Portland, Oregon, Providence, Rhode Island, and San Francisco, California.
Great, thank you. And I do think that how you intend to spend this money is very thoughtful and intentional, and I appreciate the approach that I've already heard that you wish to take throughout this process. So there are opportunities for us to be undoing harm, not just calling it out, but undoing it, and having some healing moments throughout the city. So, and in public art too, I think that this is a huge, huge opportunity. I have 3 different buckets of questions. So the first one, well, I'll just name them. So a timeline, just clarifying that, the financial specifics, and then the community and outreach partnerships that you had discussed. So just clarifying the timeline, please let me know what I'm not getting correct. So theoretically, this passes through committee, it gets signed by the mayor, and then in the fall time, you're understanding who you want to reach out to in terms of submitting projects, but then also what neighborhoods you'd like to engage in addition to the community partners. Is that also happening in the fall time?
Yeah, so we are putting out an open call to artists, which will include proposing sites. So we aren't limiting the neighborhoods, and we will make all effort to include as many as we can.
Okay. And then through the winter time and springtime, just reiterate what that timeline is, or does it largely depend on what happens in the fall and the conversations that you're having?
I think there's going to be a lot of planning happening at those times. So if we're going to have these big talks, there are going to be a lot of logistics to figure out and plan and scheduling. So once we go forward and we form a committee to advise us and to help us make a lot of these big decisions, we'll be sort of working with them to come up with realistic timelines so we can really get going and be accessible and be welcoming to everyone come spring.
Is there a certain deadline that you have to spend this money based on the Mellon Foundation?
Yeah, I think it's by the end of 2025.
Okay.
So it is pretty tight.
Mm-hmm. And we also have in that schedule, we have to procure, this relates to the budget, procure some contracts to help us with this, including around engagement. So we're hoping to be able to bring in enough kind of capacity to, once we have them on board and contracted, to be able to really like hit the ground running, and also speak to some of Councillor Flynn's questions about how we're engaging partners, how everyone's being compensated, how we're creating kind of culturally accessible and responsive events and opportunities. So we're hoping to bring on some support for that. So that'll take probably the rest of the fall and into the winter as well.
Great. And that's a good segue into my next line of questioning, which gets into the financial breakdowns of all of this. So it sounds like you do need to put out RFPs for different contracting for community engagement. How much of the $3 million will go to that? How much do you intend to pay the artists? How many commissions, staffing, any related costs with this grant? I'd love to know.
Sure. So as we sort of sort it all out, some of these are moving around, but we're expecting about $1 million of the $3 million to go to commissioning the artworks themselves. And the rest of it is sort of spread between different kinds of engagement and production and support for that, and some of that for staffing. But a lot of it will be for like someone to help us run the events and the public programming and do some of the production of the artworks.
And we're also hoping that some of the events can be kind of artistic experiences in and of themselves. So trying to break out of just like having objects that people react to and like panels, but also what are the other kinds of ways that people can be engaged. So in some ways, because we haven't done that before, we are still figuring out what the costs are on that, but hoping that those can be experiences that, we want the process to also test new models of how we engage people on these topics, not just kind of new models of what the artworks are or what they speak to. So that's a little bit of an experiment.
Okay. I mean, yeah, hearing $1 million of the three, it's 1/3 of the money. That could be going into artists' pockets and putting more artwork out there. But what you're saying is that the events that surround these spaces are going to amplify the messages that they're trying to convey to the public. Is that right? And that's going to be a very experimental thing. It's going to be something that the city of Boston hasn't done before.
Yeah, I don't think we've done that before. We haven't really had the resources to do that before.
Not at this level,
Yeah.
And certainly not as broadly. So we're really interested also in having this conversation in different media, because we all sort of learn in different ways. And I think, to be able to go back to having artists be the ones putting projects forth and us be able to react to them and get new ideas and see what we're comfortable with and reimagine what monuments could be and really think about the stories that we're telling in Boston. So that can happen, as sort of Cara was saying, with different performative aspects, as well.
Yeah, I think the good news in terms of the funding going to artists is that there's the funding going to artists to actually do the public art commissions, but then there's artists are going to be paid as part of engagement process. Artists are going to be paid as part of like community partnerships, right? So there's going to be probably quite a lot of people hired through this in the creative fields who aren't just the artist who's creating that temporary artwork.
And I'm guessing that they will also be on your advisory board.
Yes.
As well.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Do you want to say anything about the other partners? Like some of these guys?
Yeah, I mean, the folks that we're thinking about connecting with at this point, or who have already been engaged sort of in the conversation on monuments, and again, this isn't a limit, and there will be an open call, but cultural leaders in Boston, like the Hutchins Center for African American Research, Emerson Contemporary, the Powell Arts Center, Now and There, Massachusetts College of Art and Design, the Museum of the National Center for Afro-American Artists, the Friends of the Public Garden, North American Indian Center Boston, and Embrace Boston. So those are just a few of the folks that we're planning on collaborating with, and we're hoping to open it up even more and to have other people invited in.
That's great. I'm not going to play favorites with my artist groups in East Boston, but you know that there are plenty
Yes.
that I would hope that you would reach out to them and be proactive, especially get the Latinx perspective here in the city and some discussions centered around that. Okay, so my other question, I think you answered it. So right now there are no, I guess, neighborhoods that you are thinking of. You're going to open it up and try to understand where these installations make sense. Do you have any benchmarks in terms of demographics of the artists that you wish to provide commissions to? Or are you just waiting for the call to happen and see who submits them?
We'd love to reflect the demographics of the city, I think loosely, but no, we don't have, I think, exact benchmarks or restrictions there.
That's something that I would love to encourage and at least, have it, like you said, truly be reflective of the city of Boston. I know that's something that's shared by my council colleague, Worrell, so I just wanted to uplift that. And then echoing Council President Ed Flynn, this is an incredible moment, like I said, to reflect on our history. And I took facing history in ourselves in high school, and so partnering with the Boston Public Schools to not just talk about our national history, but here in Boston, and be intertwined in these conversations, I think would be excellent. So working with history teachers or whoever the experts are in Boston Public Schools and formalizing that partnership through this, I think would be great. Well, I don't have any other colleagues here. I guess my last question, other plans, I just want to make sure I'm doing justice to Councilor Worrell's questions. The metrics for evaluation, is there anything that you can speak to on that?
I think as Chief Elliot Ortega said before, that we'll be working with that advisory group to make plans for what that looks like. But we will be doing a 2-year cycle, so it will sort of have different stages as well. We'll be doing reflection upon how the first year went, moving into the second year, and then looking at our lessons from both years together and how it will impact the way we're commissioning artworks and talking about artworks going forward, both long-term and short-term.
Yeah, and I think for some of there's some things like outreach, the success of community engagement, or whether people felt heard or seen from a process. I think those are some things where we can just kind of collect information. But I think there's also some things that we haven't really thought about evaluating before, or because of the nature of what we're talking about is a little bit different. Like when we had art commission hearings about some artworks, where people had really different opinions about what should happen with the artwork. What is a measure of success of that being a good conversation? There was one in particular where if you listened to the whole meeting, you could hear people were really acknowledging opinions that were different from theirs. They were I came in with this opinion, but after hearing all of this, now I've shifted my opinion a little bit this way. For us, that might be the sign of having a successful kind of democratic process. But how you actually think about capturing that, or how you kind of state that as an evaluation metric, I think we need some help to think through some of those things. But I think in terms of outreach, engagement, and the success of the engagement, especially since we'll be trying new kinds of things, I think those are things I imagine we'll evaluate more easily. Yeah.
Maybe doing a questionnaire or feedback Google Doc or something as simple as that even, I think would be very, very helpful.
Yeah.
Once you do have some of these specifics from the fall into the winter, can I just ask that either a letter or something getting into the nitty-gritty of the how the $3 million was spent, who the funding went to, maybe their demographics, if you're allowed to share that. If I could just have a copy of that as chair, just to have on the record, I think that would be helpful. And then moving forward into 2025, thinking about the evaluation metrics and how you all felt this went, especially because it is an experimental. It's very exciting, but it is going to be an experiment on behalf of the City of Boston. So just please consider that, and I do ask for that letter whenever you do have some of the specifics.
Definitely.
So we do not have anybody signed up for public testimony in person or on Zoom. So I'm going to go ahead and recommend that this docket be passed favorably through this committee, and then we'll vote on it on Wednesday. And I think with that, we are adjourned. And I don't know if I have to say anything in particular, but I think as chair, I'm happy to say we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.